I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the little things I'd dropped in passing. It was Tuesday morning, the kind of quiet that settles in apartment buildings when everyone's still moving too slowly to make any real noise. I was in a laundry room, folding my shirts onto the table, my fingers pressing the creases into place without much thought. The hum of the dryer was steady, almost soothing. She appeared in the doorway. Ariba, my friend's mom, 40 years old, effortlessly beautiful in a soft beige sweater and dark jeans. Hair pulled loosely back, the kind of hair that always looks like it belongs to someone who's both confident and busy. She carried her mail in one hand, tucked against her hip, and I could see the way her eyes flicked over my pile of clothes before landing on me. "Morning," she said, voice low, casual, as if nothing mattered. "Morning," I replied, fumbling with a sock, pretending I hadn't noticed her. She stepped closer, not too close, just inside the doorway, letting the warm light from the hallway spill over her. There was something about the tilt of her head, the way she adjusted the mail against her hip, that made me pause mid-fold. "You like Earl Grey?" she asked suddenly, holding up a small bag of tea she must have grabbed from the corner cabinet. "I think there's some leftover in the kitchen." I blinked. Yeah, actually, that's my favorite." Her lips quirked just slightly, almost imperceptibly, and she nodded. "I'll put it on for you then. Can't have you suffering through black tea alone." I tried to laugh, but it came out a little too quiet. "Thanks." She walked toward the kitchen, and I noticed how her sweater moved across her shoulder, how her hands lingered on the counter for a second too long before she found a cup. I forced myself to look away, but not before our eyes met across the room, just for a moment, but enough to make the air feel thicker, like someone had closed a door behind me I didn't realize was open. I went back to my folding, pretending the rhythm of the clothes was enough to distract me. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from a friend. I didn't feel like texting back. I didn't respond. I hadn't responded to the last three either. It's not dramatic, just quiet. Paused, waiting for something I wasn't sure would ever happen. She returned with a cup of tea, steam curling toward her face. "Here," she said softly, placing it down with a small, deliberate tap on the table. Her eyes flicked toward mine again. Something in them, curiosity, mischief, maybe a trace of caution, made me feel seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and addictive. "Thanks," I murmured. My fingers brushed the rim of the cup, as if holding it would keep me from looking away. There was a pause, long enough that the quiet of the laundry room became noticeable. The hum of the dryer, the faint rattle of a pipe, the soft scrape of her chair as she adjusted her weight. She didn't speak, and neither did I, and yet it felt like conversation enough. Then she stood, gathering her mail again, her fingers brushing the edge of the table as she left. I caught that small movement and wondered if it meant anything at all. "See you later," she said over her shoulder, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. "Yeah, later," I replied, voice too low. She didn't look back this time, just the quiet click of her shoes on the linoleum floor as she disappeared down the hallway. I stared at my folded clothes, at the steam rising from my untouched cup of tea, and I thought about the message I'd typed on my phone 10 minutes ago, then deleted. "I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't send it, but maybe tomorrow I would, or maybe she would. The next evening, I found her in the laundry room again, balancing a basket of towels against her hip. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a simple blouse, sleeves pushed up past her elbows. The kind of clothes that make you think someone spent years perfecting effortless comfort. "Need a hand?" I asked, stepping closer. She glanced at me, then back at the towels, her lips pressed together in a small, amused line. "If you want to," she said, voice soft, almost teasing, though her eyes carried a weight I couldn't place. We folded in silence at first. My fingers pressed over the fabric, matching the rhythm of hers. Steam from the dryer curled upward, warm and heavy, filling the small room. I stole a glance at her hand brushing over a towel edge, and my chest tightened for no reason I wanted to admit. Then, as if the words had been waiting for months, she said, "I didn't always live here, you know." I looked at her. "Oh." She laughed quietly, not the kind that fills the room, but the quiet, small one you notice only if you're paying attention. "I used to have a life. Different city, different apartment. Not much, but enough to think I had a plan. Her hands hesitated over the next towel. Then Saad came along, and plans changed fast. I nodded, not knowing what to say. The weight of the confession settled over us like the warm, humid air. There was a pause, a stretch of quiet filled only by the dryer's hum. "You ever think about things you shouldn't?" she asked suddenly, eyes flicking to mine. I hesitated, then said quietly, "All the time." My voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. She didn't answer, but her fingers lingered on a towel longer than necessary. I imagined all the reasons she could pull away: my age, her experience, the unspoken lines between us. And yet, she didn't. I found myself imagining scenarios I shouldn't. Walking past her door late at night, her smiling in the hallway, tea in hand. Sitting beside her on the small balcony, watching streetlights flicker across the asphalt. Things that might never happen, but felt vivid in my chest. We finished folding the last of the towels. I carried the basket back toward the corner, she following with her mail clutched against her hip. The air was thick, yet nothing was said about it. As we reached the door to the hallway, she paused, turning toward me. Her hand brushed lightly against my forearm. Not enough to be bold, not enough to be reckless, but enough to make me notice. "Thanks," she said softly. Her eyes met mine for a heartbeat, then flicked down at her shoes. "For helping, I mean." I swallowed, suddenly aware of how loud my own heartbeat felt in the quiet corridor. "Anytime," I whispered, her lips pressed together, a small, secret smile hiding behind her expression. Then she turned, walking down the hallway, leaving me with the warmth of that simple contact. I stood there a moment, staring at the corner where she disappeared, thinking about the casual way she'd shared a piece of herself, about the way her hand had lingered on mine. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me, or maybe because I was starting to see her in a way no one else could. It was Friday evening, the kind of late that smells like leftover coffee and tired streets. I was sitting on the small balcony outside my apartment, notebook open but blank. The air smelled faintly of rain, even though it hadn't rained. She appeared at her door across the hall. Ariba, 40, elegant and deliberate in a loose cream sweater and dark trousers. Hair falling just enough to soften her face. She paused, as if noticing me for the first time, though we'd been exchanging glances for weeks now. "Ahmed," she said softly. I looked up, startled, nearly dropping my pen. "Yeah." She stepped closer to the railing, leaning slightly, a hand gripping it, the other brushing her hair back from her face. The small movements, the tilt of her head, the way she tucked her sweater into her waistband, made me forget everything else for a second. "You left your laundry basket downstairs," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes lingered a second too long. Yeah, I forgot it," I murmured. My chest tightened. I wanted to say more, to say something about her, about how she made this whole evening feel like a trap I wanted to fall into. But I didn't. She glanced at me, lips pressing together, then took a step back. Something changed. The warmth I'd felt evaporated. She looked suddenly careful, guarded. I realized then what had been simmering all along: the age, the complication, the fact that she was my friend's mother. The forbidden part of it suddenly pressed against my chest. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice softer now, almost too soft. "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing it. "Just tired." She nodded, and for a moment, I thought she might reach out, say something reckless, dangerous. I leaned a little forward, almost instinctively. Then the door across the hall burst open. Saad, my friend, 22, his usual careless grin on his face, stepped out. "Hey, Hamid, you coming down to help me with the trash?" I froze. Her eyes flicked to mine, a flash of warning. Regret. I wasn't sure. My hand hovered midair over the railing. Give me a sec," I said, trying to steady my voice. Saad didn't notice anything. He laughed, grabbed the bag, and disappeared down the hall. The moment vanished with him, leaving us exposed, awkward. She exhaled softly, her shoulders tight, then relaxed. "You have a lot on your mind," she said lightly, trying to erase the pause. I nodded, but my gaze lingered on her lips, the way her eyes softened when she looked away from me. The balcony suddenly felt too small, too close. I should go inside, she said, almost whispering. I wanted to stop her, to reach out and tell her to stay. My chest ached. My fingers itched to brush her hand, to feel her warmth again. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned forward a fraction, our faces closer than they should have been. She froze. I could see the catch in her breath. I could feel the hesitation in hers and in mine. For a heartbeat, the world shrank. Almost. Not quite. Her eyes dropped, and she stepped back, the spell broken, but leaving the tension humming in the space between us. I swallowed. She disappeared inside, closing the door softly, leaving the balcony empty, my notebook forgotten, my chest still tight. And I realized this wasn't just longing anymore. It was dangerous, and we were both dangerously close to knowing it. It was late afternoon when I saw her on the small bench by the building garden. The sun was fading, painting the leaves in amber light, and a faint wind stirred the dry petals across the path. She sat with her arms folded, looking smaller than usual. Ariba, 40, normally poised and radiant, now tense and fragile in a loose cardigan over a plain top. I approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey," I said, voice careful, almost too soft. She glanced at me, eyes narrowed slightly. Not angry, not upset, just cautious. "Hey," she replied, voice clipped. I sat beside her, leaving a careful distance, knees brushing only slightly. Silence hung between us. The world felt sharper, wind in the leaves, distant honks, a dog barking somewhere down the street. But nothing else existed except the space between us. "You didn't come by yesterday," she said suddenly. I swallowed. I had, in fact, thought about showing up, hovering outside her door even, but stopped. Something unspoken had kept me away. Guilt, hesitation, or maybe fear of pushing too far. "I had some things to do," I murmured, trying not to sound like I was making excuses. Her eyes flicked down to the ground, then back to me. "It's weird how this is happening," she said quietly. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I don't know how to. I shouldn't be." I leaned slightly toward her, but not too much. "You don't have to explain," I said. My voice shook slightly. I want to close the gap, to say something I wasn't ready to. She exhaled sharply, a sound almost like frustration with herself. "I'm scared," she admitted. Her gaze flicked to my hands, then back to mine. "Scared that if I care too much, I'll ruin everything." I nodded, though the words inside me were louder than I could speak. I wanted to tell her it was the same for me. That every day I didn't see her, didn't hear her voice, I felt the missing weight. That my chest ached when she turned away. She looked at me again, and I saw the edge of jealousy in her expression, a fleeting thought, a shadow over her usually calm face. My stomach twisted. Not for someone else, exactly, but for the moments we might lose, the closeness we'd risk by crossing, whatever line we were both silently guarding. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered finally, voice trembling just a little. I reached toward her hand, just a fraction, a hovering promise, but she pulled hers back slightly. Not completely, just enough to remind me of the distance she still maintained. We sat like that, close yet apart, breathing in the same air, the sun flickering across our faces, and it felt like the world had shrunk to that quiet bench, to those unspoken words. I don't want to hurt anyone," she said softly, almost to herself. "I'm not asking you to," I said, voice low, careful. Her gaze dropped, and for a heartbeat, I saw the raw truth, the longing, the fear, the guilt tangled together. She wanted something, but she wasn't ready to say it. I wanted to lean forward, to cross the line for once, to let her know everything I was holding back. But I didn't. We stayed there, suspended, two people teetering on the edge of something irreversible. And I realized if I moved now, there might be no stepping back. So I didn't. I didn't see her for 2 days. Not in the hallway, not in the laundry room, not when I lingered by the mailbox longer than necessary. My apartment felt hollow, like someone had pulled the air out of it, leaving the walls waiting. When I finally ran into her, it wasn't on the balcony or the bench or anywhere we had shared quiet moments. It was outside by the curb near the building entrance. She was talking to a man, late 40s, casually dressed, leaning close enough that I could see the way he made her laugh. The sound was easy, unburdened, and my chest tightened as I stepped closer, pretending to adjust my shoelace. I froze, not because I was angry, not because I felt betrayed, because I had never seen that side of her. "Hamid," she said brightly, noticing me. "I didn't see you there." "Yeah," I said, voice smaller than I wanted. Her companion looked up, smiled politely. "Ah," he said. I realized slowly this was the ex. Not just a casual figure from her past, but someone she had history with, someone who had shared pieces of her life I didn't. Someone she might still carry in her chest. The three of us exchanged small words, brief nods. I tried to stay grounded, tried to remember the warmth of the balcony, the folding towels, the quiet touches. But the warmth felt distant now, like I'd been holding a candle in a sudden wind. When they parted, she turned toward me, expression unreadable. I didn't expect to run into him," she murmured. Her fingers twitched against her bag strap, and I noticed how her eyes flicked down before meeting mine. It's okay," I said, though my own voice sounded hollow even to me. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I have to go," she said, and then she left, walking too fast, heels clicking against the sidewalk. I stood there, frozen, thinking about all the quiet moments we had shared, the tea, the laundry, the balcony bench, and how suddenly they felt fragile, almost insignificant. The next evening, I typed a message on my phone. "I want to see you." I stared at it for minutes, thumb hovering over send. But I didn't. The following day, the laundry room was empty when I went down. I stayed longer than usual, folding my clothes slowly, listening to the hum of the dryer, imagining her slipping past the door without a glance. I kept thinking about the ex, about the memories she hadn't spoken, the stories she hadn't shared, and I felt paused. Not heartbreak exactly, not anger, not regret, just paused, like life had forgotten to finish the sentence. Even when I left my basket at the corner of the room, waiting for her, she didn't come. The door stayed closed, the hallway silent, and I realized that sometimes waiting is heavier than knowing. And in that pause, I felt the full weight of everything we hadn't said, everything we might never say, and the strange ache of possibility and fear tangled together. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the city noise seems to pause, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car on the street outside. I was in her kitchen, Ariba, 40, standing at the counter, washing the last of the dishes. Her hair was loose, falling softly around her shoulders, and her sweater hung comfortably, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She looked normal, grounded, but I could see the tension behind her calm movements. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, hands shoved into my jeans pockets. "I brought some tea," I said, placing the kettle on the counter beside her. Steam rose, curling into the warm, small space. She glanced at me, and for a second, I thought she would look away. Instead, her eyes met mine, steady and soft. "Thanks," she said simply. "No teasing, no casual deflection. Just acknowledgement." I wanted to speak, to spill everything I'd kept folded in silence. The longing, the frustration, the stupid hope I nurtured every time our hands brushed or our eyes met. But my throat tightened. What if speaking it ruined the fragile balance we'd built? What if I lost her completely? She set the last dish aside, drying it with slow, deliberate motions. I noticed her fingers lingered on the edge of the towel longer than necessary. It was a small gesture, but I read it anyway. Hesitation, caution, curiosity. I wanted to lean closer to bridge the small distance between us, but I stayed still. Finally, she spoke, voice low. "You've been quiet lately." I exhaled. I wasn't sure. My voice trailed. I wasn't sure what to say, or if I should. She tilted her head, eyes searching mine. And now, I don't know. My hand brushed against hers on the counter. A fleeting contact, not enough to be bold, but enough to hold a heartbeat of truth. She didn't pull away. For a moment, the room was nothing but the faint hiss of the kettle, our breathing, the soft scrape of her towel. Vulnerability hung between us, heavier than any words could carry. She started, then stopped. Her lips pressed together. I could see the careful consideration in her eyes, the wall she had been keeping up for months, and the courage it took to even start breaking them down. I swallowed, leaning slightly closer, letting my hand rest lightly against hers. I don't want to mess this up, I whispered. You're not, she said softly, fingers brushing over mine in a quiet, deliberate touch. A pause. Okay. I nodded. My chest loosened just a little. It wasn't a confession shouted into the night, nor a declaration of love. It was quieter, more fragile, and infinitely real. She gave a small smile, one that didn't need to be loud to matter. Just acknowledgement, acceptance, connection. Okay, I repeated, voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, it felt like the pause had lifted. Not fully resolved, not perfect, not free of complication, but ours. Real, grounded, and quietly alive. We stayed like that for a moment longer, hands brushing, tea forgotten, letting the silence speak for what words could not. The next morning, I was up before 8:47 a.m., the old clock in the kitchen ticking steadily, a quiet reminder that some things move on even when you don't. She was already there, Ariba, 40, hair loosely tied back, sleeves rolled up, pouring black coffee into 2 small mugs. The aroma wrapped around the small kitchen, warm and familiar. Morning, she said softly, eyes meeting mine for just a second, the corners crinkling in a hint of a smile. Nothing flashy, nothing that had to be said, just acknowledgement. I nodded, taking the cup she handed me. We sat at the table, side by side, fingers brushing occasionally over the ceramic rim. Steam curled upward, curling like the memories of quiet evenings, of folded towels, of the bench outside in amber light. Things we had never named, but had carried between us like small treasures. I noticed she poured herself slightly more coffee than usual, a detail only I would notice. A small repetition of habit, a marker of normalcy, and I felt a quiet joy in that simple gesture. She glanced at me, caught my eyes, then looked away, and I realized I was smiling without trying. The days settled into something ordinary, but meaningful. I helped with laundry sometimes, carried her tea when she was busy, and we found ourselves sharing small routines, checking mail together, stepping out onto the balcony to watch the first hint of rain, passing words softly while folding clothes. Each gesture became a thread in a quiet tapestry of companionship, grounded and real. One evening, we found ourselves on the old bench outside the building, the same one that had seen hesitant conversations and unspoken confessions. The streetlights flickered over our faces as she leaned slightly toward me, a small, comfortable closeness that hadn't needed any grand words to exist. I miss this, she said quietly. Not a declaration, not a plea, just a truth hanging in the air. Me too, I said, letting my hand hover near hers, brushing briefly against hers as it had 100 times before. Nothing dramatic, but enough. Enough to be enough. Time passed, as it does, measured in routines and ordinary moments rather than fireworks or proclamations. Yet it felt like progress, like earning each day together rather than demanding it. Later, in the quiet kitchen, I poured 2 mugs of tea, Earl Grey, just the way she liked it, and we watched the steam rise, catching in the morning sunlight. The thermos sat nearby, the laundry basket folded and tucked in the corner, the clock quietly marking 8:47. Life was quieter, yes, but warmer in ways that counted. And in that quiet, I realized something. Love wasn't always an announcement. Sometimes it was the way someone poured your coffee, the way their fingers brushed yours without thought, the way shared silence could feel like home. I looked at her, 40, beautiful, quietly confident, present, and she looked at me, 22, hesitant but finally steady. And I understood a truth only we could ever fully know. No fireworks, no confessions shouted, just a soft, earned peace threaded through the mundane, alive in the everyday. And as she set her cup down and smiled faintly at me, I thought quietly, this is enough. This is real. The story ends here with calm intimacy, callbacks to previous motifs, bench, tea, 847 quiet routines, and an emotionally earned closure.